Hey everyone, quick look at this. See that? Almost 98% of you watching aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is the best way to not miss any new infidelity stories and support what we do here. It's free and it makes a huge difference. Hit that subscribe button below. Okay, now to today's story.
It's funny what you think you know about someone. Really know them deep down. You build a life brick by brick, side by side, for 25 years. 25 years. Sounds like forever, doesn't it? And it felt like it with Sam. My Sam. It felt like our own little forever, solid and real. We had this life, see? Not flashy, maybe. Not like you see in the movies. But it was ours, comfortable. Like a favorite armchair you sink into at the end of a long day. We had the house with the slightly crooked mailbox Sam always meant to fix, the two kids who grew up way too fast and flew the nest, the inside jokes that didn't need explaining anymore. We had Sunday mornings with coffee and the crossword puzzle. He always did the across clues, I did the downs. Predictable? Maybe. But it felt safe, grounded. I trusted him, implicitly. You hear that word, implicitly, and maybe it sounds dramatic, but that's how it was. He was my rock, the steady beat under the surface of our lives. Why wouldn't I trust him? He tucked me in at night, kissed my forehead, remembered the weird way I liked my toast cut. He held my hand through job losses and sick parents. He celebrated my little wins like they were world championships. We weren't just married, we were a team, partners, best friends. I looked at our life, the tapestry we'd woven together over all those years, and I thought, this is it. This is happiness. This is strong. Nothing can touch this. I genuinely believed our foundation was granite, unshakable. I'd look at him across the dinner table. Maybe he'd be telling some goofy story about his day at the office, exaggerating like always, and I'd just feel this wave of contentment. A quiet knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with the person I was supposed to be with. There was never a single, solitary reason to doubt. Not one, until there was. It wasn't a sudden explosion. Nothing dramatic, not at first. It was more like a change in the air pressure before a storm. Subtle. Almost nothing. I remember thinking back later, trying to pinpoint the exact moment the ground started to feel less solid beneath my feet. Was it the way he started guarding his phone? Not obviously, but just keeping it screen down, angling it away when a notification pinged. I'd asked him once, casually, who texted so late. He'd mumbled something about work, a new project with demanding deadlines. Okay, fine. Sam worked hard, always had. He was dedicated, so I pushed the thought away. It felt disloyal to even question it. Then there were the slightly longer work dinners. More frequent late nights at the office. Again, explanations seemed plausible. A big merger was happening, things were stressful, he needed to put in the extra hours. He looked tired, stressed even. I felt guilty for even having a flicker of suspicion, wanting instead to just be supportive. I'd make sure dinner was kept warm, draw him a bath sometimes, tried to be the good wife, the understanding partner, because that's who we were. That's who I was. But there was this one evening. He came home late, smelling faintly of perfume. Not my perfume. It was floral, expensive smelling, different. I remember standing in the hallway as he brushed past me, heading for the shower. Rough day? I asked. He just nodded, didn't meet my eye. Yeah, long one. Clients, he muttered. And as I stood there, the scent lingering in the air, that little flicker of unease I'd been batting away flared up again, stronger this time. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was confusion, a sense of dissonance, like hearing a familiar song played slightly out of key. It was wrong, but I couldn't immediately say why. I told myself I was being silly. Maybe he'd just stood next. To someone, maybe it was nothing. But the explanation felt thin, even to me. That night, lying in bed next to him, listening to his steady breathing, the silence felt different. It wasn't comfortable anymore. It felt heavy, loaded. That was the first night, I think, that the fortress I thought we lived in started to feel a little less secure. Just a tiny crack, maybe, in that granite foundation. But it was enough to let a chill creep in. That little chill I felt, the one from that tiny crack in our foundation, it didn't go away. If anything, it settled deeper into my bones over the next few weeks. It's strange how, once a doubt takes root, everything starts to look different. Things I wouldn't have blinked at before suddenly seemed significant, meaningful, in a way that made my stomach clench. Sam's phone, for instance. It wasn't just kept face down anymore. It seemed permanently attached to his hip. He'd take calls outside, walking out onto the patio even if it was raining, cupping his hand around the receiver. Work stuff. Sensitive negotiations, he'd say with a strained smile if I happened to glance his way. The late nights became more frequent, often bleeding into weekends now. "This merger is killing me, Britt," he'd sigh, rubbing his temples, looking genuinely exhausted. And part of me, the part that loved him for 25 years, just wanted to smooth his hair back and tell him it would all be okay. But another part, this new, wary part of me, kept noticing the details, like the fact that his exhaustion didn't always match the hours he claimed to be working. Sometimes he came home oddly energized, almost buzzing, after a supposed 16-hour grind, or the vague answers about who he was actually meeting with. Names would sometimes slip out, names I didn't recognize, followed by a quick backtracking, or a change of subject. There was a charge on the credit card bill for a restaurant I'd never heard of, quite expensive, on a night he was supposedly working late eating pizza at his desk. When I asked, pointing to the statement casually over breakfast, he waved it away. Oh, that was a team dinner, celebrating hitting a target. Forgot to mention it. It sounded plausible, almost. But the way he avoided my eyes, the slight flush creeping up his neck, it felt practiced, rehearsed. I tried talking to him, gently at first. I remember saying one evening, trying to keep my voice light, "Seems like work is really taking over everything lately, honey. We barely see you." He immediately got defensive. "What am I supposed to do, Brittany? Just let the company fall apart? This is important." The sharpness in his tone shocked me. We rarely argued like that. It felt like I'd poked a bear I didn't know was there. So I backed off, telling myself I was imagining things, letting my anxiety run wild. Who wants to believe their perfect life is built on a lie? It's easier to ignore the signs, to paint over the cracks and pretend the wall is still solid. Denial is a powerful thing. It wraps you up like a warm blanket, even when you know deep down that the cold is starting to seep through. The moment the blanket was ripped away, though, that I remember with perfect, painful clarity. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. No private investigator sliding photos across a table. It was mundane, almost stupidly simple. It was a Tuesday morning. Sam had already left for work, an early start, he said. I was tidying up the bedroom, picking up discarded socks. Some things never change, right? And I saw his tablet lying on the nightstand, plugged in. He usually took it with him. I figured he'd just forgotten it in his rush. I wasn't. Looking for anything, honestly, I wasn't. Maybe a tiny part of me was curious, that suspicious part that had been growing bolder. But mostly I was just tidying. I picked it up to put it neatly on the dresser. As I lifted it, the screen lit up. A notification banner flashed across the top. An email preview. The sender's name wasn't one I knew, and the subject line, it wasn't about work. It read, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Same time next week." XO, time stopped. Just stopped. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. I stood there, frozen, staring at those words. So, kisses and hugs. Not exactly standard. Corporate communication, is it? My heart started pounding, a sick, heavy thud against my ribs. My hands began to shake. I dropped the tablet back onto the nightstand like it had burned me. It couldn't be. There had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding. Spam? A wrong recipient? But the sender's name, it felt vaguely familiar. Had he mentioned her? Maybe that new colleague he'd been vague about? The denial reflex was still there, desperately trying to find a loophole, a way this wasn't what it looked like. But the feeling in my gut, cold and sharp now, told me otherwise. This wasn't a crack anymore. This was a chasm opening up right under my feet. That email preview, those few casual, intimate words, they were the trigger, the point of no return, the moment I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. Later that day, feeling like a criminal in my own home, heart hammering, hands trembling so bad I could barely type, I logged into our shared phone account online. Something I hadn't done in years. I didn't even know exactly what I was looking for. But I had to start somewhere. Staring at the call logs, the rows of numbers, felt like deciphering an alien language. Until I saw it. One number, appearing over and over again. Late at night. Early in the morning. Often for long durations. A number I didn't recognize. My breath hitched. This was real. This was happening. And I had a feeling it was only the beginning. There's a line you cross, isn't there? You tiptoe up to it, telling yourself you won't step over. That you're just looking, just satisfying, a harmless curiosity, just proving yourself wrong. But once you find that first piece of undeniable proof, that phone number, that email subject line, you're already over the line before you even realize it. Suddenly, I wasn't just a worried wife anymore. I was a detective. A really reluctant, heartsick detective investigating the potential crime scene of my own marriage. It felt dirty, wrong. Looking through Sam's things, digging into our shared accounts with the intent of finding betrayal. It felt like a betrayal in itself. But the need to know? It was stronger. It was a physical ache, a constant pressure behind my eyes. Sleep became a luxury I mostly couldn't afford. I'd wait until Sam was sound asleep, his familiar breathing now a source of anxiety rather than comfort, then slip out of bed. The glow of the laptop screen in the dark kitchen became my secret confidant. I started with the credit card statements, going back months. And there they were, hiding in plain sight among the groceries and gas charges. Flowers sent to an address that wasn't ours. Dinners at cozy, romantic restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges, usually midweek, explained away at the time as business travel, but now looking horribly suspicious. One charge stood out, a boutique lingerie store. Definitely not my style, and certainly nothing I'd received. The amount made my stomach churn. Who was he buying silk negligées for? Then there was the phone number from the online records. I typed it into a search engine, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. A name popped up, linked to a social media profile. Her picture was nice, pretty. Younger, of course. Smiling brightly, posing somewhere sunny. The name matched the sender of that email I'd glimpsed on his tablet. Seeing her face, putting a real person to the abstract suspicion, felt like a punch to the gut. I felt nauseous. I spent hours scrolling through her public posts, looking for clues, links to Sam, anything. It felt obsessive, desperate. Was this me? Sitting alone in the dark, cyber-stalking a stranger because my husband, my partner of 25 years, was potentially living a lie? Sometimes a wave of self-disgust would wash over me. I'd slam the laptop shut, telling myself I was better than this, that I should just trust him, or at least confront him like a grown-up. But then the image of that email, that lingerie charge, that smiling photo would flash in my mind, and the grim determination would return. I had to know the extent of it. I couldn't confront him half-cocked. I needed the whole picture, however ugly. It was an emotional roller coaster, truly. One minute I'd be furious, imagining smashing plates. The next, I'd be dissolved in tears, mourning the life I thought I had. Then came denial, whispering that maybe it was all a huge misunderstanding. Maybe the woman was a colleague's wife using his account. Maybe the hotel was a legitimate business expense he'd forgotten to categorize. My mind scrabbled for innocent explanations, but the evidence kept piling up, each piece clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. The breaking point came about 3 weeks after I saw that first email. I found a small gift-wrapped box tucked away in the back of his closet, behind his old ski boots. It wasn't hidden very well, almost like he didn't care if I found it, or maybe he just assumed I'd never look there. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, not extravagant, but thoughtful. Engraved on the inside was a single initial, not B for Brittany. It was A, for Amanda, presumably, the name from the email and the social media profile. Seeing that initial cold and solid in my hand was the final straw. The pretending had to stop. The quiet dinners where I pushed food around my plate, the forced smiles, the polite conversation while my insides were screaming, I couldn't do it anymore. That evening, I waited until after dinner. The television was murmuring in the background. Sam was scrolling through his phone, of course. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I took a deep breath, the bracelet feeling heavy in my pocket. Sam, I started, my voice surprisingly steady. He looked up, distracted. Yeah? We need to talk. Something in my tone must have alerted him. He put his phone down slowly. Okay, he said, his eyes wary now. What's wrong? I pulled the bracelet out of my pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. I found this, I said quietly. In your closet. Who is A, Sam? The silence stretched. He stared at the bracelet, then at me. His face went pale, then flushed red. He didn't look shocked, not really. More caught, cornered. His first reaction wasn't remorse or explanation. It was anger, deflection. What the hell were you doing going through my closet? He snapped, his voice rising. Are you spying on me now? What is wrong with you? That was his opening move. Accuse me. Turn it around. Make me the bad guy for discovering his secret. And right there, in that moment, watching him try to bluff his way out, I knew the fortress hadn't just cracked. It was about to crumble. His accusation hung in the air between us. Are you spying on me now? Heavy and ugly. For a second, maybe I faltered. Maybe a flicker of guilt for how I found out tried to surface. But then I looked at the bracelet on the table, thought about the smiling photo of Amanda, the hotel charges, the late-night calls, the perfume, and the anger returned, cold and clear. Spying? I echoed, my voice low but shaking slightly. Is that really where you want to start, Sam? Or do you want to talk about the bracelet? About Amanda? About the restaurant charges I don't recognize? The flowers sent to an address that isn't ours? The hotel rooms? How long, Sam? How long has this been going on? I wasn't shouting. Not yet. It was worse than shouting. It was the quiet, deadly certainty in my voice, the voice of someone who already knew the answers but needed to hear them said out loud. He deflated, like a balloon suddenly pricked. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a sort of weary resignation, mixed with panic. He sank back onto the sofa, running a hand over his face. He didn't confess immediately. He tried, weakly, to minimize. Britt, it's not what you think. It just sort of happened. She doesn't mean anything. The usual lines. The cliches you hear about but never think you'll hear directed at you, in your own living room. But I just kept looking at him, waiting. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the mindless chatter of the television he hadn't turned off. Finally, it started to spill out. Not in a rush, but in broken pieces, reluctant admissions dragged out of him. Amanda. Yes, her name was Amanda. Yes, the email was real. Yes, the bracelet was for her. How long? Not weeks or months, years. Years. He mumbled something about 3 years, maybe closer to 4. 4 years. My mind struggled to comprehend it. 4 years of shared Christmases, birthdays, anniversaries. 4 years of me trusting him implicitly while he was living another life. He'd met her through work, initially. It started innocently, he claimed. Lunches, coffees, complaining about work. Then it wasn't innocent anymore. The late nights weren't always about demanding projects. The business trip sometimes included an extra personal leg. The vague answers, the guarded phone, the occasional distance I'd tried to ignore, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. He wasn't just having an affair, he had built a whole parallel narrative. While I was keeping his dinner warm, he was having romantic meals elsewhere. While I thought we were saving for retirement, he was buying lingerie and jewelry for someone else. Each admission felt like a physical blow. I felt cold, numb, like I was watching this scene unfold from outside my own body. This man sitting across from me, the one I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, felt like a stranger. The fortress hadn't just crumbled. It had been revealed as a facade all along, a movie set with nothing solid behind it. 25 years. How? Much of it was real? The question echoed in the sudden, terrifying emptiness inside me. When he finally ran out of words, or maybe just excuses, silence descended again. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Britt, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I was stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, we can fix this. Fix this? How do you fix something that was fundamentally based on a lie for years? How do you rebuild trust when the very bedrock has turned to dust? I couldn't even process the idea. All I felt was a profound sense of loss. Not just loss of him or the marriage, but loss of my own history, my own judgment. How could I have been so blind? The immediate decision felt impossibly huge. Stay? Leave? 25 years, the house, the memories, tainted as they now felt, the comfortable life, versus this gaping wound of betrayal. Starting over at my age? Alone? The thought was terrifying. But staying. Living with this knowledge, looking at him every day, knowing what he'd done, the lies he'd told so easily, that felt impossible too. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just stood up, feeling strangely calm, detached almost. I think, I said, my voice hollow even to my own ears. You need to leave. For tonight. Just go. He started to protest, to argue, to plead again, but I just shook my head. Go, Sam. Please. I can't even look at you right now. He eventually gathered a few things, his face a mask of misery and maybe self-pity, and left. The click of the front door closing echoed in the house like a gunshot. Alone in the sudden, crushing silence, the numbness finally cracked, and the tears came. Hot, angry, heartbroken tears. I cried until I couldn't breathe. Later that night, huddled on the sofa, feeling utterly lost, I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up my phone, my hands still shaking, and found the number. For a therapist my friend had recommended months ago for work stress. I didn't call, not yet. It was too late. But I saved the number. It felt like the first tiny step out of the wreckage, just acknowledging I couldn't navigate this alone. The path ahead was completely obscured by fog, but saving that number felt like trying to find a compass. Those first few weeks after Sam left were blurry. A thick fog of shock, grief, and anger rolled in, and some days it felt like I could barely see my hand in front of my face. The house felt enormous, echoing, with silence. Every object seemed to hold a memory, now fractured and uncertain. Was that vacation photo real? Or was he already entangled with Amanda then? Did he mean it when he laughed at that joke during our anniversary dinner last year? The questions were relentless, poisonous ivy creeping over everything I thought was solid. The biggest question, of course, was what to do next. Could 25 years just be erased? Thrown away? We tried therapy. Sam agreed, full of remorse, or at least appearing to be. We sat on that neutral-colored sofa, facing a kind-faced woman who asked gentle, probing questions. Sam cried. He apologized profusely. He promised it was over, that he'd do anything. And maybe part of me, the part that still remembered the young man I fell in love with, wanted to believe him. But sitting there, listening to him talk about his mistake, it felt hollow. The trust wasn't just broken, it felt fundamentally shattered, irreparable. It wasn't just the affair itself, hurtful as that was. It was the years of calculated deception, the ease with which he had lied day after day. Looking at him across the therapist's office, I realized I didn't know him anymore. Or maybe I never really did. After a few sessions, I knew deep in my gut that staying wasn't an option for me. It wouldn't be fixing something broken. It would be pretending the break never happened, and I couldn't live like that. The decision to end the marriage was agonizing, like tearing off a limb, but it was also, strangely, freeing. It was the first decision I'd made purely for myself, for my own sanity and future, in a very long time. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Don't let anyone tell you it is. It was messy, painful, and took far longer than I thought possible. There were lawyers, financial settlements, the heart-wrenching process of dividing up a life built together, furniture, photos, even stupid coffee mugs. There were days I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by sadness or rage. There were awkward conversations with friends, some of whom didn't know how to react, some who took sides. Telling our adult children was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But that therapist whose number I saved, I called her. And I kept going, week after week, talking, crying, sometimes just sitting in silence when the words wouldn't come. She helped me unpack not just the betrayal, but my own role in the dynamic, my tendency to overlook things, my fear of conflict. I learned to sit with the uncomfortable feelings instead of running from them. I leaned on my sister and a couple of close friends who let me ugly cry without judgment. I rediscovered things I used to love but had let slide: painting, long walks in nature, reading books that weren't just quick escapes. Slowly, painstakingly, I started clearing the wreckage and figuring out who Brittany was, separate from Sam, separate from the marriage. It turns out she's stronger than I ever gave her credit for. Resilient, even eventually capable of finding humor in the sheer absurdity of it all, like the time Sam tried to explain away a hotel charge by claiming he needed thinking space. Right. Looking back now, a few years down the line, the pain isn't gone, not entirely. It's more like a scar now, a reminder of something I survived rather than an open wound. Do I forgive Sam? That's a complicated question. I've worked hard to let go of the bitterness, mostly for my own sake. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? I understand his weakness, maybe, a little better now, though I don't excuse his choices. But more importantly, I think I've forgiven myself. For not seeing it sooner, for believing in the illusion. I realize now that his choices weren't a reflection of my worth. They were about his own issues, his own emptiness. What I gained, strangely, is a clearer vision. I trust my intuition now. Those little flickers of unease I once dismissed, I pay attention to them. I learned that I am perfectly capable of being happy on my own, that my value isn't tied to being part of a couple. My life is smaller now in some ways, but it's also more authentic. It's mine. If I could tell anyone going through something similar anything, it would be this: trust your gut. Those little whispers of doubt are often telling you something important. Don't ignore them just because the truth is scary. Reach out for support: friends, family, a good therapist. You don't have to carry this burden alone, and be patient with yourself. Healing isn't linear. There will be good days and terrible days, sometimes all in the same hour. Allow yourself to feel whatever you need to feel without judgment. Most importantly, know that this is not the end of your story. It might feel like it right now, but it's not. It's a horrible, painful chapter, yes, but it's also a chance to write a new one where you get to be the main character, strong and whole. My hope for the future? It's quieter now, less about grand plans and more about finding joy in the everyday. A good cup of coffee, a walk with a friend, finishing a painting I'm proud of. I appreciate my own company. I appreciate the peace in my home. I don't know what the next chapter holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel optimistic. I rebuilt my foundation, this time on solid ground. My ground. And it feels good.